Can the Cleveland Cavaliers really build a super team around LeBron James? Oh, and that too without giving up Kevin Love. What is going on, y'all? 5 Sports Talk back at it with another video talking, of course, some NBA. And here to talk about this scenario because all the talk this summer has been about LeBron James leaving Cleveland. Where does he need to go? What team gives him the best chance to win? And Cleveland's been the last team, and for good reason. We saw the performance, of course, in the finals from everybody on the Cavs roster, not named LeBron James, and it was not pretty, especially Game 1, but we won't go down that route. But with that being said, I think in his heart of heart, if LeBron James could stay in Cleveland, meaning if Cleveland gave him the best chance to win, he would stay. I think the only reason he would consider leaving or is considering leaving is because he knows that Cleveland does not. But is there a way that the Cavs can change that? Well, according to a Bleacher Report sort of article, there is a way. And basically, I came across this article today, and I thought it was very interesting because, you know what? I had been tinkering with this idea for a bit now. How could the Cavs do something to sort of appeal to LeBron James to stay this summer? Could they do anything? And they actually went through and used a couple of the ideas that I had thrown out earlier in earlier videos, if you guys watched them. So I'm going to kind of walk you guys through what this article is talking about, and I'll link the article as well down below. But it's basically them getting a super team, if you will, around LeBron James, and that means acquiring Kemba Walker, Paul George, Hassan Whiteside, and LeBron James, and that's without giving up Kevin Love. So how will that happen? Let's talk about it. So step number 1 to building this super team: acquire Kemba Walker. Look, I talked about Kemba Walker in my previous videos, and I'm so glad somebody else thought about this as well, because I was like, why isn't this more of a conversation? Okay, the Hornets, folks, if you guys don't know, are in salary cap hell, okay? And they did not make the playoffs last year. That is about as bad as you can get in the NBA, okay? To spend as much money as they're spending and not even make the playoffs, I mean, that's bad, okay? And it's not going to get any easier. They're clearly going through an overhaul. They hired a new head coach and James Borrego. They got a new president of basketball operations in Mitch Kupchak. So there are going to be some drastic changes, and I'm predicting one of them is shipping Kemba Walker out of town. Kemba's a free agent next year. A lot of people are like, oh, Kemba's their best player. You gotta trade your best player if you're going to rebuild and attach a bunch of bad contracts with your best player so that you can start all over. And that is exactly why this trade could potentially work, which is Kemba Walker and Marvin Williams to the Cleveland Cavaliers for George Hill and the number 8 overall pick, okay? I know you guys might laugh and think, oh my God, this is, you know, a ripoff for the Hornets, but it's really not, folks, because like I said, if you're looking to rebuild, you need to trade your best assets for future assets. And this is what the Hornets will get. They'll get a number 8 overall pick, which is a top 10 pick, which they could still get a very good player. I'm predicting Colin Sexton, who would be a great replacement, a great guy to build around. He's a point guard as well out of Alabama. So take, for example, you got Colin Sexton, and then you get a guy like George Hill. I mean, I know he's got a lot of salary due, but he's a nice veteran presence there. You could have him sort of start and groom whoever that next point guard is. The Cavs take that bloated salary of Marvin Williams, so they take that salary off the books for the Hornets, and they get Kemba Walker, who's an all-star point guard, still, I believe, one of the most underrated players, point guards in this league. Yes, is he a liability on defense, but really, a lot of the guards in this league are. He can put the ball in the basket, and at some point, that is really just what the Cleveland Cavaliers needed. Besides LeBron James, somebody else put the ball in the basket. Somebody else who can create their own shot. Sorry, Kevin Love. He does put the ball in the basket a lot, but he doesn't really create his own shot. So that is step number 1. Now, step number 2 is acquiring one Paul George. Now, this step is a little bit more difficult for me to process and believe, but I'll give you what the article says and then my thoughts on it and potentially how I could see this working. So basically, what the article says is Paul George is a piece that the Cavaliers need to go after, and Paul George was on his way to Cleveland previously when trade discussions were going on. Before he got traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder, they were looking to bring him on to the Cavaliers, but then Dan Gilbert or whoever, I feel like nixed the deal, if you will. And even when he was in OKC, potentially at the trade deadline, because the Oklahoma City Thunder could lose him for nothing. There were another set of rumors and speculations that Paul George could be traded again, and it didn't happen. Basically, what that means is there has been traction for a Paul George deal, and now the Cavaliers need to capitalize on it. Who is going to do that for the Cavaliers? It's got to be one LeBron James, who needs to recruit Paul George, because Paul George has a player option this year, and he is going to opt out of that player option and become a free agent. But LeBron needs to convince him not to do that, but instead to opt in and then get traded from the Thunder over to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, as for who would they give up, now keep in mind the 8th pick is gone. George Hill is gone in the Kemba Walker trade. So now you have Jordan Clarkson and Kyle Korver going to the OKC Thunder for Paul George. Now, this is what the article says, and yes, I had the same reaction. Why on earth would the OKC Thunder trade Paul George for Clarkson and Korver? And look, the only explanation here really is it's better than nothing. It's better than literally him walking out and you get nothing. But sometimes nothing is better than something, because you get that salary off your books, right? So basically, that's sort of the argument for it and against it at the same time. But if you take a look at the other players on the roster, I mean, if the Thunder want anybody else besides Clarkson and Kyle Korver. And I know Jordan Clarkson had a really, really bad playoffs, but he's still relatively young, where I would take a chance on a Jordan Clarkson. So I'm not saying that this is likely, but there is some way I could potentially see this deal working if the Thunder know Paul George is walking out, or Paul George says just trade me, or I'm walking out and you get nothing for it. So maybe they could find a third team in here and trade for him. Or you take a look at the rest of the roster. Like I said, I mean, you got guys like a J.R. Smith. You got guys like a Jeff Green, if you will, but Jeff Green's a free agent. But you get my point here. So that is step number 2 to acquire Paul George. Step number 3 is to acquire Hassan Whiteside. Yes, that's right, Hassan Whiteside. A lot of people went sour on him after his playoff performance, or lack thereof, if you will, against the 76ers, in which, he really couldn't get on the floor because Eric Spoelstra refused to play him, and he's been sort of outshined by their, rookie in Bam Adebayo, who's been very, very good for the Heat. So at this point, it looks like the Heat are done with Whiteside's antics. They're done with his sort of, loudmouth, and they want to move off of him. And if the Cavaliers are willing to be takers, the salary that Whiteside is owed is about $25 million this year, and the next year at about $27 million. I believe that's a player option. But this is another case of, you would have thought, hey, why would Miami trade Hassan Whiteside? But listen, you take salary off the books, and the Heat, they're not closer to a championship, so they could look to be rebuilding. And you take a look at the fact that they don't want to deal with Hassan Whiteside anymore, and they want to groom some playing time for Bam Adebayo. So this could potentially work, certainly more realistic than the Paul George scenario. So what would the trade be? We're looking at a Tristan Thompson and Seti Osman for a Hassan Whiteside. Now, I know that is not a lot in terms of a package, but hey, Tristan Thompson, if the Heat decide to, stay the course and they want to be competitive, he's going to be a bruising rebounder free. He's going to, give you the hustle stats. He's going to be able to pretty much rebound the ball and get you a lot of putbacks and stuff like that, and won't really have the antics besides the Kardashian stuff, and we know that. But with that being said, Tristan Thompson will allow you to do that, and I just feel like he won't complain as much as Hassan Whiteside. So this is the reason for that deal. But again, maybe throw in a second rounder, maybe throw in something else for this trade. So there you have it. Now we've got a brand new starting lineup of Kemba Walker, Paul George, LeBron James, Kevin Love, and Hassan Whiteside. So that is how the Cavaliers can form a super team. Is it realistic? Probably not. Okay, the Kemba scenario and the Whiteside scenario, I could see happening. The Paul George one is very, very tough to believe. But again, if you decide to throw in a Kevin Love, and OKC definitely wants to stay competitive with Russell Westbrook still around, that could potentially be enough to get a Paul George. So there are some things that the Cavaliers can do to be able to convince LeBron James to stay. And I highly advise them, I don't know if they're watching this, they probably aren't, but I highly advise the Cavaliers to do something, because you know what? I think LeBron James wants to stay. And if you give him a reason to stay, God damn it, he's going to stay. So I really hope GM Kobe Altman, owner Dan Gilbert, and all of the Cavaliers are working diligently around the clock to find a way to make this happen, make a lot of these moves happen so that LeBron James doesn't have to go anywhere. Instead, the talent's going to come to him. So really curious to see what happens. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this potential super team, if you will, of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Do you see it happening? Do you like this team? Do you think there's any chance of it happening? Keep in mind, we've still got the Kawhi sort of scenario, and I'm going to be discussing this in upcoming videos. Maybe instead of Paul George, they could acquire Kawhi, or maybe instead of Whiteside, they could acquire Kawhi. Who knows? They have to get very creative here, maybe get a third team involved. But there are things that can be done. This is why you get paid the big bucks to be the GM, Kobe Altman, so make it happen. Again, let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment down below if you guys agree or disagree. If you guys liked my video, please give it a big thumbs up. Please make sure to follow me on my social media links all down below for that. As always, do not forget to subscribe, and thanks for watching.